So Honda is back in the game. They're back in the game, Mark.
Big time. Honda CBR1000rr SP.
So we were going to get Jonathan Ross in for this review.
Yeah, can you imagine?
But I found out how many R's were involved in this, and I didn't think it would go down that well on camera. But yes, it's Honda's CBR1000rr Fireblade. We're back in the game.
It's like a game of countdown, this, isn't it? Can I have a consonant, please, Carol? This official CBR1000rr SP. How many different words can you make out of all of that? Well, what a bike,
isn't it? And you know, it's so funny on that naming front. I mean, actually, you know, at Knox we've got, you know, products that need named and stuff, and we've got the Urban Pro at the moment. Imagine next year we're going to call it like the Urban Pro Race, Urban Pro, I don't know, whatever.
Well, what happens?
They ran out of steam with that one, but yes, it probably justifies it because the CBR is massively iconic. Sports bike. It's the one that changed the market back in the 90s.
They're the pioneers of super bikes, right? Yes. Sport bikes. You know, that you go back, like you say, you go back to the 90s. The Fireblade was the bike, right?
Was
the bike. And I think it's fair to say, in the following years, certainly kind of in the last maybe 5, maybe 10, they've just been a little bit superseded, haven't they? As soon as BMW launched their S1000rr in 2010, so we are going back 9-10 years, they just moved the game forward, didn't they?
Yeah.
And again, what's quite interesting is what they've done in terms of how they've launched this bike, getting markets involved, and you quite rightly were talking about how the performance on track with MotoGP hasn't necessarily translated in terms of what you can go out into your showroom and purchase and ride on the road.
Well, I think there's been a bit of a disparity or a bit of a disconnect, and I'm sure some of the guys at Honda and the dealerships would have been frustrated at that, because on the one hand you've got this massive marketing machine of the MotoGP and the fact that they're winning everything, and Marquez is like, you know,
dominating.
It's just totally dominating, and then what you can actually purchase on the road, it's the Fireblade, is sort of like behind the pack actually. It's probably fallen out of into obscurity really. You know, it can't win any of the tests because it's not powerful enough. Doesn't have the electronics. Actually, in the real world, it's probably a bloody good bike. And to be honest, but this is last year's one. I considered purchasing one last year because they always look great, and because the dealers can't shift them, there's a whacking finance or great finance available on it, and it'll still be a great. You know, it just didn't have the electronics. I'm not personally massive on electronics, just because. Anyway, that's where I sort of come from, but. This new one, you know, talk about, it is bringing all of that prowess from MotoGP back into a bike that is going to be an absolute stonker and probably a class leader, to be fair.
The reality is, these super bikes for all the manufacturers, Yamaha, Ducati, BMW, Kawasaki, and Honda are halo products, aren't they? And it is a kind of top trumps battle. If you come to war, you better bring your heaviest hardware. And you're quite right. Unfortunately for Honda, they've just been that half step behind, haven't they? Until now. To be honest, the spec sheet on this thing
it's massive.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're talking, 216 horsepower.
Well, the figures have been banded around, anything between 214, 217 horsepower. I mean, we've obviously done quite a few videos on the super hyper nakeds. These are even more powerful. I mean, they're just...
It's insane.
Yeah, but I think, you know, the significant difference between that market and this is the way that they're kind of positioning this bike is it's very track focused.
Yes.
And that's reflected again in kind of how many different things you've got on it. IMU, wheelie control, multiple traction control modes, and the amount of engineering and changes that have gone into the engine. So a lot of the inspiration around this is from the RT213V, which is effectively the GP bike, and it also gets raced at the Isle of Man TT. You're talking titanium everything, aluminium everything. The list just goes on and on and on with this bike. You know, electronics with the SP bike, which is the one we're looking at. Electronic suspension, it's got improved ride-by-wire, new TFT. I mean, it's a brute. I mean, you know, although the exhaust looks like the standard Honda can, it was developed in conjunction with Akrapovic. And I mean, we haven't even talked about the styling.
I mean, the styling on this bike, in my opinion, because obviously styling is subjective.
Yeah, very much.
This is really gorgeous. I mean, and they do it in a black version as well, which we'll put into the frame right now. But the all black, I'm an all black fan. My bike is all black. But that is jaw-droppingly gorgeous in my opinion. I love what they've done with the wings. That
so again, GP inspired.
A separate flappy wing. You know, you've got something built into the.
It probably does fly. I mean, maybe if they made them slightly bigger, you could just take off with this, couldn't you? But I mean,
I think give it too much that happy handle, you probably will.
Well, I mean, I'd just think. Again, we haven't talked about, you know, the curb weight, wet, ready, curb weight, effectively 200 kilos.
Yeah, super competitive with that.
So you're talking about bikes that are doing 1,000 horsepower per ton.
Yeah,
that is.
And they're stuck to the road with like the tiniest bit of rubber.
Yeah.
And there better be good rubber on it. So there's the Supercorsas Pirelli. Yeah. You know, that's the top of the.
Well, look, that's as close to a track tyre for the road as you can get, right?
Yeah.
So you know they're going to be super sticky. The section on it is absolutely massive.
Yeah.
But
and you've got great brakes as well. So the SP is fitted with Brembo Stylemas, which we talked about that brake. Actually, quite a lot of the top bikes that are coming out are fitted with that caliper, and that's been orientated and peppered with holes to make it lighter, to induce more air. Massive amount of power available on that.
Absolutely.
On that braking system. And yes, again, frankly, you're going to need it.
You are.
I love the exhaust. Actually, I love the look of the exhaust. And you know, again, we're seeing like exhaust get bigger and bigger and bigger. We've had quite a few conversations about that. But this, they've made a really, really nice job of it, and they've hidden the cat well as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a massive fan of that S1000rr cat. The end can's quite nice, but it's got an absolute coffin of a catalytic converter.
I mean,
they've hidden this quite nicely with the plastics.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? What we're finding is obviously, you know, sort of walking around the show and reviewing various different bikes, is how the different manufacturers come up with different solutions for this Euro 5 legislation. And isn't it interesting how some of them seem to do an amazing job of the packaging and others not so much, but everybody's presented with different problems. You know, I don't think necessarily Euro 5 issues translate based on how much power your engine produces, but like with the Kawasaki, you've got a forced induction and it's a whole different problem.
Yeah.
But proportionally, this does look just right, doesn't it? And that kind of reference back to MotoGP, you can see that in every aspect of the bike.
Yes.
The winglets, the longer swing arm, the handlebar position, the tech. You know, I mean, they have taken a big step forward with this bike, and they haven't. You definitely get the sense and the feeling that they've left no stone unturned this time.
Sure.
You know, we know this. That, you know, the BMW just launched a new RR. Yamaha have just come to market with their new R1 and R1M. You know, there are obviously Panigale, and there are different iterations of the V4, but they're all very similar, aren't they? Similar weight, similar power. So again, as we always say, you know, when this gets launched and reviewed and compared, it's going to be absolutely fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. So the standard bike comes fitted with Showa big piston fork, a standard and Nissin brakes. It's probably going to be great, and that bike comes at 20,000 basically.
Yeah, give or take 20 grand.
The SP is another 3.5 grand, but it comes with some extra trick bits, doesn't it? So you've got a semi-active Ohlins front and rear shock.
Yes. Yeah. Can I refer to my notes, because this is
such a lot of spec on this bike.
So in conjunction with the hardware, the Ohlins objective-based tuning interface now offers finer suspension adjustment front and rear. 3 individual modes can be set and stored, allowing the riders to configure multiple settings for track. And you can switch it whenever you want whilst riding the bike.
I mean, that's quite impressive, because you've got, you know, if you are going to take some track, there's a multitude of tracks that you can take. You know, there's some really bumpy tracks that we've got here in the UK. You know, bone shakers, and then you're going to take it out somewhere like Jerez or something, long sweepers. You know, there's some different setups needed for that,
and also for weather conditions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if you go out and it's you know, it's damp or it's bone dry, you're going to want to, you know, you're going to want some more compliance in your bike. So, I mean, you know, this is the thing with this bike, isn't it? Yes, I'm sure on the road it's a very impressive bike, but you know, I mean, and again, without going over old ground here, it's got way too much performance for the road, in all honesty. You know, 217 horsepower, 200 wet. You know, the only way you're ever going to be able to extract anything like the full
potential of this bike is on track.
Yeah.
And they're not making any secret of that, are they? I don't think.
So that's been our first look at the CBR 1000 from Honda, a real game-changing bike. Please like, please comment, please subscribe to the channel too, and we'll see you next time.